Eric Lipsy, and this is Galt University. Today I'm here with Brian Ochsner, longtime farmer. How are you today, Brian?
Doing well, Eric. Doing well. And how about yourself?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you very much for coming on with us today. We wanted to talk about agriculture. We want to talk about what's going into the cost of food these days, because you hear a lot of people talking about different things, anywhere from wheat to eggs or whatnot, and what's affecting the cost from farm to table to us as the individuals consuming it. And I also know that you have some wisdom on how people can also save money on food. So we'll get to that part as well. But first, I want to start with the economics of food coming from farm to the table. What's affecting that cost today?
Sure. So basically our current system of agriculture has been based on um, affordable energy costs, like affordable gas and diesel to transport the food from the farm, farm to your fork, to the pasture to your plate.
Mhm.
After World War II, back in 1946, the average distance from a producer to the end consumer was 40 miles. So it was all pretty local back then. You know who you get a side of beef or some pork or some chicken from your neighbors, or butcher down the road, or just in the next town or two away. But over the years, as agriculture became, farms became bigger, big ag corporations became more involved and controlled a larger quantity of the food. Um, Farmers and ranchers became more content because it was easier just to sell their grains at the local elevator, which is what we do. We raise hard red winter wheat, which we plant in September. It sprouts and then goes dormant during the wintertime, and we harvest it in the summer, like usually late June, early July, and then harvest that grain, take it to the local elevator, and we're done. We get paid, and that's how it works. And with livestock, you have most cattlemen and pork producers, sheep producers. They just sell they usually just have cows raise calves, wean the calves, or wean the little critters off the mother, and sell them at the local sale barn. And then it's a lot easier for less work for the producer to do that. And also over the years, I think the corporatization of agriculture and government policies have also encouraged that. You've heard the saying, go big or go home.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's also applied to American agriculture. Back in the 1970s, the Secretary of Agriculture was a guy named Earl Butz, and he encouraged farmers to plant just as much as possible, fence post to fence post, and that's to keep the increase the supply of food and keep it as cheap as possible. So another thing that's driven our current, what we, not just the quantity of food, but the quality of food, has been the emphasis on yields and bushels, and not necessarily on nutrition and on the nutrition in the crops and the animals we produce. In for the crops, it's basically was like synthetic fertilizers, short-term fixes, kind of like agricultural steroids, if you will, for to get better short-term grain yields. But also the same goes for livestock.
Mhm.
In order to get the livestock, like say like for the cattle buyers and people that run the cattle or livestock in a feedlot, they want to get them to slaughter as fast and economically as possible.
Mhm.
So what they'll do is usually it's been switched from most livestock had a grass-fed diet. It's been switched to a grain-fed diet. That's to accelerate the finishing process and the maturation process. And they've also used some and muscle enhancers or steroids in the process as well. One product called Ralgrow, and it does a good job of that, but it's not necessarily good for the
Consumer for us.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
because we're
So,
ultimately consuming everything that they put into the animal, correct? I mean, if you're eating the animal.
yes, and not just that, but also into the our grains as well. And I've
Yes.
taken a look at what we do, and some of the things we do doesn't make a lot of sense, because the emphasis is on you know killing weeds or killing pests, just avoiding those. But in the process, it's like I told you before in our earlier conversation, when we use chemicals to kill the weeds sometimes on farms to kill one form of life, and then we turn around and we fertilize to try and enhance the plant, enhance the crop. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And studies have come out that chemicals like glyphosate are not good for people in general, or any living being. So to sum up to kind of tie it together in a bow, um, what's caused what we're seeing today with the inflation in food has been, we've it's our food system has been basically enabled because of cheap energy and cheap transportation costs. So that I think I said, not sure if I said before, the average distance from a producer to consumer for both grains and meats is now 1,500 miles.
Yes. Mhm.
And now that we're seeing, obviously we're seeing higher gasoline, higher diesel costs at the pump, and that's how majority of our grains and meats get to go from the producer to the grocery store.
Mhm.
So that's a big reason why we're seeing increase in prices in food over the last 2 years. And I'll explain why I don't think our current system of agriculture is sustainable, and what options you have in order to bypass the traditional ag system.
Mhm. Yeah, because I noticed that even when I go to, say, Costco or whatnot, I'll see there's food from Chile, there's food from Mexico, there's food from
Mhm.
all of these different places. So I totally get where you're saying, where you used to just get food locally, 200 years ago, 150 years ago. Now food is coming from all over the place. And you had mentioned something about they have to pick the bananas while they're still green, so that
Mhm.
they're yellow by the time by the time they get to us. So it's not even
Right.
ripening on the vine. And there's just so many things like that that are really concerning these days. But it's not just the health of the food; it's also the cost that goes into having to ship food from all of these different places to be able to get them on our plate.
Oh, exactly. That's for sure. And you don't know what they've been treated with. What preservatives and chemicals they've been treated with along the way.
Absolutely, just to keep them preserve them from going bad while they're being shipped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I grew up on a farm myself, and I remember we had pears and apples around, and I'm like, those fruit was they were never shiny.
Right.
The
Right.
apple didn't shine, you know.
No,
So
no.
now you see these fruit today, a lot of them, even some of them that'll say they're organic, and you see that they're shiny, and I'm like, that's not how an apple's supposed to look, you know.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And yet that's funny. That's good. Great that you brought up the organic, um, name or label. Um, when it comes to whether something's organic or not,
Yes.
that definition is pretty broad.
Oh yes.
There's a lot of games
Absolutely.
that go into what's organic, what's not.
Yes.
So at the grocery store, you really have there's a way you can find out on apples if you know what to look for as far as the codes go.
Hmm.
With and I don't I um a friend of mine knows that, and I should ask him about that, um but I think because of there's not as much truth in labeling as there used to be.
Yes.
It's more important that you know I think more consumers want to know where and how their food's being grown
Hmm.
instead of just relying on the grocery store and I'll get it here.
Right.
Because the prices are just getting to a point where even in my hometown supermarket in my hometown in Kansas, excuse me, they're selling heads of lettuce for $5 a head.
Wow.
And that's just not sustainable, you
And I
know.
can imagine what that looks like to people out in that area because it's farm town in
Right.
general. So you're thinking $5 for a head of lettuce is just ridiculous when I have farms all around me. Why am I paying this amount? And of course, now they might just not be growing lettuce in that area, but still,
Mhm.
it's a thing where you have to at least think about how much you're paying for something that you probably could grow in your backyard.
Oh, yeah, exactly, exactly. And then you're right. That's kind of the kicker because where I'm from in the western part of Kansas, it's not conducive to really growing like produce like lemons
Mhm.
and lettuce and those kind of crops. Um, it is possible. I mean, I think during the spring and summer, it's possible to do that, but just not a lot of farmers have done that because we've gotten used as a society and country, we've gotten used to just, oh, I'll just instead of growing my own, oh, I'll just go to the grocery store. It's easier to
Right,
do it that way.
right. We've been conditioned for that. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have, both in most families, the husband and wife works, you know, they're earning a living. They don't really have, they're busy with just life in general, and don't have the time or inclination to want to um something other something else to do. Like, oh, after I come home, I want to go to the garden. Nah, I don't think so. I'll just kick back and watch Netflix or, or
And
watch
for
TV.
that reason, we're paying the price for it. I mean, that's what goes into it when
Right.
everybody's dependent on something. They can basically charge whatever they want, and we're gonna have to pay it because we don't have the knowledge or don't have the means to be able to grow food on our own. And I know we're gonna talk a little bit about that coming up here. But yeah, so that is just another thing that you think about that goes into the cost of things. Is just our inability. And some of us may have a bit of land in our backyard where we could do something. I mean, people are spending 40 and 50 and $60,000 on landscape. It's like, why not have some edible landscape? Focus on
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is it's just really interesting seeing how the prices of everything, like even last year, the fertilizer cost
Mhm.
just skyrocketed. Now, maybe you could touch a little bit on that because when I was a kid growing up on a farm, we used manure that,
Yep.
from the pigs and everything else that we farmed, it went into a cesspool. We took that and that's what they used to fertilize the fertilize the grounds and whatnot. So it was kind of amazing to me. I'm far removed from the farm these days, but it's kind of amazing to me when I heard that fertilizer was going through the roof, how much it was costing. I'm like, what? What is it about this fertilizer that's so different from the things that we had back then? And I guess it's completely different now. And we're dependent on a total different type of fertilizer. So maybe if you could shed some light on that and why that, because that also drove up the price of food.
Correct. That's part of it. Um, but let's before I get on the fertilizer section, I want to explain on go back to what the average farmer gets for every dollar you spend at the retail dollar you spend at the grocery store for food. This is according to a Farm Bureau study a few years ago. I think it's still probably fairly valid. The American farmer on average gets 15 cents of that dollar. So
Wow.
it's not
That's
so
not,
it's you
not
really
a great
can't blame
margin
the
at
farmer.
all.
It's all the middlemen in between. They're getting their cut, and then rightfully so. You have to have when you have grain, you have to go to the mill the grain, the baker to bake it, and then obviously the company to truck it and deliver it to your grocery store to the end user.
Mhm.
Um, but and get so having said that, when we get to fertilizer, it's it's a generic term, and usually it's talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. And so in farm, it's in the scientific symbols for all those three elements are N, P, and K. So unfortunately, most farmers and crop grower or produce growers just focus on those three elements when it comes to growing a good crop or
Mhm.
plant. But really, in reality, there needs to be, there's a total of 19 elements need to be present in order to grow a optimum plant or crop. So, and it sounds complicated, like, oh, 19, I can afford all that. But it's really simpler than you might think. Really, when the two main elements that you need to be concerned about in your crop, when you're planting a crop or a garden, is phosphorus and calcium. Phosphorus and calcium are considered the king and queen of nutrients. So if you get the amount ratio of those two correct in your soil, and you make modifications for the what might be missing for the rest of the other 17 nutrients, then you got the best chance to grow the best crop possible. And you can a lot of soil tests will just go over NPK and maybe a couple other elements. There are some good soil test companies that will give a pretty complete complete test of what your soil has, what's deficient in, and the recommendations for it.
Mhm.
And one company that I think I recommend is called Apical Soil Ag Services. They do soil, sap, and water testing. So obviously you test your soil, test the sap of a plant while it's growing. And it can help with not just growing plants or crops, but also trees, and also your water, determining what the quality of that is. And although the conversation is mainly on food, on today's conversation, the quality of your water is a big one too. Because like most municipal and suburban water sources have fluoride in it,
Mhm.
and that's not good.
Ah,
Or fluoride and other chemicals that just aren't really good for your health in general. So if you can get get a good source of clean well water, maybe even spring water, or avoid the municipal sources of water as much as possible, that'll do wonders for the quality of the health of your health, but also your pets and animals as well.
I never thought about that because we in my house we don't drink fluoridated water. We don't cook with fluoridated water. But then I never thought that the food we're eating could be grown with might be grown with fluoridated water because I never thought about how the water could affect the food on that level, with the fluoridation, because I
Mhm.
know it can calcify the pineal gland for us as human
Right.
beings, but I never thought about on the food level when they're spraying this water on the food to grow it, how that could have an impact as well.
Yeah. Well, in rural areas, the fluoridation isn't as much big of an issue because it's mainly rainwater and irrigation water from wells
Mhm.
outside of the towns and communities. Um, but it gets back. Getting back to the chemicals we use to spray the weeds for pesticides, and that sticks around.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I just I used to take for granted what you do. We've always done it, no problem. But then you think about it, like, huh, this doesn't. I don't like what we're doing here. And but the good news is when it comes to you know fertilizers and how you manage your soil and whether it's for farming or for gardening, there's a way you can grow food and you don't need to use a lot of or any synthetic fertilizers.
Mm.
Um, it's the name of it's called regenerative agriculture. Maybe you've heard that term.
I have.
Um, and the more I look at it, the more it makes a lot of sense. Um, because and it involves the use of what's called cover crops, like wheat, corn, and your crops in your plants in your garden. That's your cash crops or your main crops. What the cover crops do is they're a natural way to control weeds, but they also as they grow and then you can have livestock graze them. You can plow them under, or you just crimp them or or get rid of them without use of chemicals. they can also add natural. They can act like a natural fertilizer for your soil. So to me, that makes a lot more sense, um, to use cover crops the right way, the right
Mhm.
kind of cover crops. So you're not using, you know, weed killer, and you're not, plowing the fields over and over like we do on our farm back in Kansas, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
As I told you before, big ag is similar to big pharma, is how we do things. We address the symptoms,
Right.
the surface symptoms,
Mhm.
not really the root cause. So instead of looking at, weeds are kind of different kind of weeds are different. They give you different signs as far as your soil health. They're indicators, like nature's indicators of whether your soil is healthy, whether it needs something else. It's really fascinating when you get into the science of it.
Absolutely.
And then, so that's why I think when it comes to fertilizer, to kind of circle back to the original question on fertilizer, yes, it can be a little, it can be a little unnerving when you hear these prices are going up on fertilizer in general, but they're generally talking about like NP or K, like phosphorus or potash is the main one, the main element there that I think the news media is talking about. But they really don't do a very good job of explaining which fertilizer, is increasing in price.
Right.
And I think it's mainly kind of a narrative and kind of a scare tactic as well. Sure, it's something to be concerned about, but you don't have to, if you're a farmer who knows what he's doing with regenerative agriculture, or a gardener with, it's doing things the right way. You really don't need to rely on synthetic fertilizers year after year.
Right. No, that's very great. That's excellent information, actually. There's so many things you're sharing today that I have no clue about, even because apparently the farming world from when I was a kid to what it is now is just completely different. And granted, that was a long time ago. So thank you for sharing those things with us. So I think right now is a perfect segue talking about, the growing food and healthy food and things like that. A great segue into helping people or giving people some pointers on how they could be saving money on food.
Sure. Pardon me, let me get a drink here real quick.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
So, couple ways you can save money on food. Um, you're seeing, I'm not sure about about your neighborhood, but in my neighborhood here, and um, you're seeing more, direct to consumers, like local markets,
Mhm.
like you used to see years ago,
Yeah.
with lower prices for beef and other um, um, ag products. That's one option you can look at. Number two, there's a you'll find things, um, entities called CSAs. I think community sharing associations,
Okay.
where you can buy like, um, um, certain quantities of, fruits and vegetables every week.
Mm.
It's really cool. If you're a member of it, you can, and they vary by association, like the prices and availability. Um, but a bunch of farmers come together and they just sell their produce through the CSA, and you can just go online and look for a CSA near you. That's a great way to do it. You can, um, and it's usually through like spring and summer. That's a great way to go. Farmers markets are good too. Those are, you're seeing more of those nowadays as well.
Yeah, so I think that right there should actually cut out a lot of the cost because now you're not dependent on food being shipped from a long ways away. Your local farmers market is local. I mean, key, it's local. They're growing
Exactly.
the food locally, and it's food that's probably indigenous to Colorado or food that can naturally grow here, as opposed to food that is not really geared towards the environment here. I imagine so. Yeah, so but it is probably healthier, and I've heard some talk about that. I don't know much about it, but I've heard in some ways having locally grown food is can actually help boost your immune system, but that could be a whole different topic for a different day. But
There is some truth in that because getting back to the quality versus quantity, your food, um, there's more of an emphasis, more farming. There's a growing. It's not a big trend, but it's an emerging trend, I'd say, where farmers are looking now measuring the nutrition levels in their produce, what they
mhm,
grow, not just the fruits and vegetables, but also the meats. There's a guy, the farmer in Virginia named Joel Salatin, really sharp guy. Doesn't take himself too seriously. His website's called it's thelunaticfarmer.com. And what he does is really outside the mainstream of what what traditional or normal farming is. But as from my experience, that traditional normal farming isn't working for anybody nowadays, and really isn't serving consumers well, not getting good quality food, and it's frankly not a lot of farmers are doing well financially either on this
mhm,
model.
yeah.
That's why I don't think it's sustainable. Um, so back to the nutrition, like it's in all of his, he went to farming in Virginia called Polyface Farms. You want to look it up. It's a great model for, I think, for smaller or alternative farmers to learn how to do it. And if you want to learn how to do it, that's one option as well, because Joel has materials as well on how to start your own small farm and make it profitable. Also, I have a friend of mine I work with. He's a experienced cannabis grower and agronomist. Very, very sharp guy um, who knows his stuff, and he's taught me a lot.
Yeah.
I've as and I've never always been consider myself a lifelong learner. I don't think I'm in this day and age. It's impossible to know everything. There's so much information out there.
Absolutely.
You just
Absolutely.
can't do it. But also over the last 3 years, you have to look and say, okay, based on what we've learned and the assumptions we made that may not have been true when it comes to medicine and science.
Mhm,
Okay, I've reevaluated all are my assumptions when it comes to agriculture. Is this is this true? Is this the highest and best practice, the highest and best way to produce food and and be a good steward of our resources?
yes.
Um, so that's why I've just kind of went down the rabbit hole and looked at you know talked with my friend about how to grow better food,
Mhm,
um, and what you can what goes into growing better food, and if you really need to do things we're doing right now. And it turns out we really don't. It's a different way of doing things, but it's I think it's a better way. It's a way for the future. Um, and people can also grow their own food. It is possible,
yeah.
and it's um, now it may seem a little daunting at first because if you don't have a farm background or never done it before, it's like, oh, where do I start? You know, but like I said, Joel's got some great information as well. Um, Learn more about it. There's a farmer in North Dakota his name's Gabe Brown. Really, really excellent stuff as far as the science of it. You want to know why regenerative regenerative agriculture is a better way than what we're doing right now.
Mhm,
But also, I partnered with my friend Brad, and we help farmers and others who want to grow more food how to um, how to do that. Grow more of their own food and better quality food as well.
well, that's great, because I think that's one of the biggest hindrances with people trying to grow their own food is, one, they have no knowledge of how to do so, even if they have the land size that allows them to be able to do it, they just don't have the knowledge. So maybe this is a perfect time for you to tell tell the audience how they can get in touch with you guys to help them through the process, to consult with them as to what they need to be doing, what they need to look for, and things like that to be able to grow their own food.
Sure. Um, so so basically, what you have to know is what what plants and crops grow best in your area. You know, um, obviously in Western Kansas, that's not conducive to lemons or fruits that require a lot of moisture and a lot of sunshine. Sunshine's no problem, but the moisture is a big problem. Kind of know what crops and are best suited for your area. Next, know what kind of evaluate your resources. How much land do you have? You can also do it in your own, even if you don't have any land. Let's say you live in a urban suburban house or condo or apartment complex. You can, through maybe just a little plot of dirt you have on the inside, or even hydroponics, it's possible to grow a little bit of your own food there. And then once you have some soil or water resources available, I'd recommend testing that soil. That's really it's an added expense, but if you don't know but soil is really the key to growing everything. Soil health is primary, and it's not just NPK. So you want a soil testing service that gives you a complete spectrum of all 19 nutrients needed to grow a good crop. And it's going to be, it's a little bit, it can be a little, it's an expense. I think it's necessary expense if you want to grow a good quality crop. And the testing service I recommend is called Apical Ag Services out of Oregon. Average test is about $80, then plus shipping. You ship the soils to them, they'll test it, and then they'll email you test results back. I don't get a dime for recommending them. There's no financial relationship there. I just recommend them because I think they're one of the best around. They can give you the best information to go with. And then also my friend of mine, my cannabis growing friend, and myself, we're partnering together to help start a new venture to help farmers and gardeners to grow better crops and get better results. We're still, it's a new joint venture. We're still deciding on a name, and website's under construction as well. But to get in touch with us, for a handful, if you want to get just a free consultation, if some listener wants to get a free consultation on how to grow a better garden or where to start, they can talk with Brad or myself, and we'll be glad to talk with you. You can give me a call or text. Number is 303-503-0312. Or an email address. It's my name, Brian, Brian, .och, S as in Sam, N as in Nancy, ER, @gmail.com. And we'll be glad to do just a no cost, no obligation, phone or Zoom call and see how we can help folks out.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Brian, for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I know I'm a bit more enlightened than I was about the farming industry, how it all works and what I could be doing to save money on food. So I appreciate you coming on today. Thank you.
You bet, Eric. It's been fun, and you're welcome. Take care.
All right.